Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Otram's YouTube channel. Here at Otram we do lots of Land Cruiser Knuckles, so I figured I would go ahead and make a video of how we do them here. We're going to do it as 3 parts, one for teardown, one for using the knuckle centering tool, and then another for rebuild. So this one's the teardown. First thing I like to do is take the caliper off, get it out of my way. So we'll start with undoing the brake line here at the axle. And I already sprayed everything down with penetrating oil a bit ago to make this hopefully go easier, which this one is not. There we go. So we'll get the line there at the axle housing unhooked, pulled loose, and then we can take the actual lines that hold the caliper onto the backing plate loose. And I break them loose with a flare nut wrench, and then come back with just a stubby 10 wrench to make them come off quicker. There we go. I'll go ahead and take that line completely out. We'll set that aside to go in the parts washer here in a little bit. Then we can get a 17 and take the caliper itself off. And somebody's put a non-factory bolt in the top hole. Let's switch that out for a 19. Yep, that is definitely not the right bolt. And we can take the caliper off, set it aside to get cleaned up. And then we can start taking the hub off. And it's a 10 millimeter to get the hub style bolts. Make sure it's in free before you pull it loose. Otherwise, the spring pops out. And then that just comes off. If it's unlocked, or if it's in lock, this is extended and it's not fun to put back together. Put that over the side. Now we've got a snap ring in here holding the hub body on. So we'll pull that guy out. And then it's a series of 12 millimeters here. Oh, this one seems to be cross-threaded on. There we go. Get all the little washers off. And you're just left with the cone washers. So for the cone washers, brass drift, heavy hammer, and just hit them on the end of the stud. And they'll start to pop free. There we go. And then just grab a pair of pliers, wiggle them off. Whoever did these last beat on the side of the hub instead of the studs. So now the hub's all deformed. Not really what you want to do. You can see where they've beat dents into all the hub surface. And we'll clean that up. And then inside here, wipe a bit of the grease back. And there should be a locking tab, but whoever did this last didn't bend them over, at least not all the way. They should be harder to tap back than that. Then you can take your 54mm hub socket. And there's an outer nut. Followed by the retaining star washer that locks everything. And then an inner nut. Take that out. Then we can pull the whole wheel hub and brake rotor off. I like to stick my thumbs in against the inner outer wheel bearing, just so it doesn't fall out when you grab it. And we can set that all aside to get cleaned up. We're going to put new rotors and pads on while we've got it torn this far down. Clean that up a little bit. Go ahead, get a 14mm, and take the spindle screws out. We can throw this seal away because we've got a new one coming in the kit. Spin the backing plate off, we'll clean that up and paint it. Then you can just take a rubber mallet and they usually don't fall off like that. Take the spindle off and it gets cleaned up. Then you've got the axle. If you feel inside here, you'll feel two flats. If you line the flats up with the steering arm, it'll wiggle and pull straight out with the inner. We'll set that aside. And we've got cardboard down on the floor because of all the grease and nastiness that is leaking out of this. And then we can take the tie rod off. And I've already pulled the cotter pin out of there. And somebody swiped my impact. So we'll do it with a ratchet. And you can use the hammer trick to get these loose. I like to use a tie rod end puller just because it saves the boots on the tie rod end. These are getting replaced, so it doesn't really matter, but snug that up. And tighten it till it forces the tie rod end out. We've got that out. Now there's a series of 10mm bolts on the back that hold the felt wipers on. So we'll go ahead and pull those off. Sometimes you gotta dig through the grime to find them. There's 8 of them back here. Six if you're doing an 80 series. That's all of them. And we go ahead and start taking the steering arms off. Those are 17mm bolts, or nuts rather. And these are buried in goo. And same as the hub studs, these have cone washers on them. So you're gonna take your brass drift. You can see it wiggle when they all come loose. A lot of times it helps to take a wire brush to everything to cut through the grime. We're going to throw everything in the automatic parts washer, so I'm not going to mess with it. A lot of times you can just rock them up off. These don't want to, so we'll take a longer brass punch. Just catch them under the back. And pop that off. And then you'll have shims that come out from between the steering arm and the knuckle. You want to make sure those stay with the arms or the bottom caps they came from. We're going to recheck them with the knuckle centering tool to be sure when we put it back together, but it's always good to have the baseline. And then you can pick it up a little bit off that inner bearing and take the whole knuckle off. We'll take the lower cap off later. And then you can peel all the old wipers off and throw them away because you got new ones in the kit. And then you're down to just the knuckle ball. We just need to knock the races out. And there's 2 notches inside the ball to give you room to get a punch in on them. And there goes one. And the other. And if you alternate back and forth from front to back in the slots, it makes it drive out easier. And then we just need to pull the inner axle. So down in here is the inner axle seal. This little guy is the cause of all your problems. When that leaks, it lets the gear oil wash all the grease out of the closed knuckle and makes the mess. So we'll get all this cleaned up, all the other parts run through the parts washer, and we'll come back to use the knuckle centering tool to get our proper shim thickness to make sure that the axle shaft is centered on the inner axle seal so we don't have future leaks. So I will see you guys shortly.